Hi, everyone. I'm attorney Donna DiMaggio Berger, and this is Take It to the Board, where we speak condo and HOA. Today, we're taking a close look at the future of sustainable community living. Rising energy costs, climate realities, and shifting resident expectations are forcing boards and managers to rethink how their communities operate. Going green is no longer just an argument about doing the right thing for the environment. It's about financial savings, healthier lifestyles, and long-term property values. My guest today, Nicolas Milo, Senior Director of Developer Services and Business Consultant for Property Management and Hospitality at KW Property Management, has been helping both high-rise condominiums and large homeowners associations navigate this transition. With a focus on practical strategies and real-world results, Nicolas has seen firsthand how sustainability measures, whether it's energy and water efficiency, renewable technology, or smarter building systems, and how they can deliver immediate benefits while also positioning communities for the future. Nicolas brings a wealth of insight into what it takes to make these initiatives succeed, from overcoming cost concerns and regulatory hurdles to engaging residents and building consensus. I'm excited to dive into the lessons he's learned and the opportunities that lie ahead. So with that, Nicolas, welcome to Take It to the Board.
Thank you, Donna and team, for having me.
We have not covered this topic before. And it's funny, 4 years in, I say that to every new guest because we really have not revisited any topics. And I remember early on, one of my colleagues saying, yeah, but what are you going to find to talk about? Time after time, and there's always something new to talk about. So today we're talking about sustainability and green communities. I think the starting point really is people use those terms interchangeably: sustainable community, green community. Is there a difference, or are we just talking about the same thing?
Sure. So, I think the term, green is a little bit more ambiguous, versus sustainable is a little bit more specific. But the beautiful thing about both terms is that they really can be used and applied in a number of different facets for any community. So, to kind of extend on the whole green and sustainable sort of concept, you have different LEED certifications or, governmental agencies who may implement certain requirements for buildings. That's kind of a different topic, a little bit more, elevated and specific. But the whole green, sustainable type community is a great topic. People can throw it around, talk about it, take, small steps, large steps, and everything in between to really promote, implement responsible practices, reduce a community's carbon footprint, and really just taking intentional steps to sort of achieve sustainability and responsibility.
Do you think it's a topic that intimidates people, Nick? I mean, I want to dig into LEED. I know we're not going to
Sure.
get into, LEED certification. We don't have all the time in the world to talk about it, but I do want you to touch on that because I think for some people, it can feel like an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah, and I think that's really why, using the term green and sustainable is so friendly socially with these communities because there aren't a set of requirements such as what LEED has or other, sort of certifications have. So there's really no reason why, a community going green or sustainable should be scary or overwhelming. As we'll talk about today, there are, like I said, small steps that they can take which make an impact and they can evolve that, over the years. So really just any sort of approach that they scale, that they, believe works for their community is going to make an impact in the end.
Okay, so let's do two scenarios. Let's start with a standard high rise, 7 stories. Let's say they've got 75 units. They've done nothing. They haven't thought about this before, but sit down with you, Nick, and KW, and you bring it up. You start looking at their operations. What would be some of the starting steps for a high-rise condo that's never even thought about going green?
Sure. So obviously this could be achieved in different phases. So the first phase would be to take what they currently have and ensure that it's being operated, managed, or utilized in the most efficient manner. It doesn't matter what a community or individual residents or boards sort of personal beliefs are. At the end of the day, if there are steps that they can take to either prolong the life of their equipment, reduce energy, all of that equates to reducing costs. So whether you believe in your community going green or not, everybody can pretty much believe in, cutting costs is good for the community overall. So the first sort of approach would be to, really inventory all of the equipment that runs in that property. Mechanical systems, HVAC systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, and really going to those manufacturers' recommendations to ensure that the equipment is being operated effectively, efficiently. Because in doing so, you do tend to yield green results, right? The equipment is more sustainable when it's operated properly. Um,
What about I'm sorry to interrupt, but what
sure.
about like an upgrade on HVAC? I know even from as a homeowner, we've saved when we've upgraded our AC units because the technology's gotten better and better. And it's the same thing with light bulbs. Technology, I would imagine, plays a role in this sustainability discussion.
Correct. Exactly right. So that would really be more of like the second phase. So what sort of upgrades or changes could be made to achieve green practices and or cost savings? So you had mentioned replacing some HVAC equipment. There are building management systems that can be installed that can monitor those sorts of systems more efficiently. There are flow meters that can be installed to promote more efficient use of water in those HVAC systems. And there are always, newer models of those types of equipment that come out that do tend to be a little bit more sustainable. And so when we approach that sort of second phase of upgrading or replacing, it's really in, the community's best interest. And if we're their partner, providing them with a long-term forecast of, not just initial purchase, but also what the maintenance costs would be, replacement costs would be, and really, they'll see that there does tend to be a return on investment by making those sort of initial purchases. So us being able to provide that roadmap to them will help them make more, educated business decisions.
What about immediate behavior modifications? Let's say we're not the board's not at the point yet where they want to make an investment in new equipment,
Mhm.
but are there behavior modifications you discuss with them that can help them save money and go a little more green with the equipment they currently have?
Absolutely. So there are, our company, for one, really strives on our whole value optimization program that we provide to our communities. And this can be anything from, cutting costs, being more efficient, being more productive, whether it's green, sustainable, or any other subject. So we would definitely look at something like, an operating supply such as, bottled waters. You know, Everybody drinks water. Everybody likes the bottled water. So what we tend to do, if the community agrees, is for a very, very small investment, install domestic water filters throughout the common areas and really promote the use of that with not only the staff but the residents. So now you're cutting costs, but you're also, reducing your, uses of plastic.
Just to stop you for a second, I'm seeing that at a lot of upscale hotels as well. So you're saying the filtered water and then fill up your water bottle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Also, you asked about sort of behavioral changes. We definitely look at the, trash and recycling operation that a community, has, as if it's an existing property or would set something up for a new property. And what we do is we partner with the local, vendors, understand what their, recycling processes are, what products do they recycle, what products don't they recycle, because it can get confusing for some folks. And what we tend to do is create, signage announcements, right by those areas where the resident would either drop trash or drop recycling to further, educate and further inform residents, basically creating cheat sheets almost, right by the areas so the resident knows exactly what they can and cannot recycle, just as an example.
What's the incentive to recycling though? Some people are dead set against it. I don't want to
Sure.
call out my parents on the podcast, but they are not recyclers. They do not
Mhm.
recycle. So what's the incentive? Let's say in that multifamily building, are they getting any sort of credit on their trash bill?
So cardboard is probably one of the most, used recyclable material right now, just in the uptick of packages and deliveries that everybody does. What we typically do is implement some sort of cardboard rebate program for the community. If it's a large community that has high demand, we'll bring in a baler system that will actually compact the cardboard. And by doing so, a truck can pick up more in less visits and provide rebate or credits to that community. So there is a financial incentive in recycling.
Do you have any associations where they actually find people who aren't recycling?
Absolutely. Yes.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yes. Like your parents, everybody has their own, personal beliefs. And, I think green and sustainable is definitely a personal, passion of mine. But I think where it hits more communities is to educate them, get the communities more engaged in the whole concept of it. And if there is some sort of financial gain, 100% of the time, we can usually get folks to participate.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, look, rules are rules. I mean, there's a reason that our associations have so many rules regarding a variety of different topics, parking, what you can do in your units, what you can and can't do on the common areas. So, yeah, I think it would make sense that if the association overall is deriving a financial benefit from recycling. By the way, I share your passion for state sustainability, but I think we're also practical people. So we don't even have to go that route. If it's something that's in the best interest of the association, let's just say financially, it makes sense to enforce a recycling program. What do you think are the most cost-effective green upgrades associations can implement? And I'm going to throw HOAs into this mix because
Sure.
I know KW represents a lot of large homeowners associations. We do as well. What are some of the most cost-effective green upgrades?
Sure. So for cost effective, I see it two ways. I see either, low cost to implement or, some sort of rebate credit. You can get your future costs down. So I had already mentioned a few. I have a short list here, but essentially, very low cost effective, which not only impacts the community, but the surrounding area, is to get your residents engaged on, weekend or monthly sort of like neighborhood cleanups. What we have found is very successful there is even if we don't manage the neighboring buildings or communities, we'll go kind of partner with them and kind of grow the manpower. Obviously, it doesn't cost anything other than just some time. People like it because they get to, get some exercise. They feel good for the day. And it actually does, lower costs. So we have communities in South Florida where streets will flood during, heavy rain, storms or, high tide in some parts of the year, as you know. So getting the community to kind of clear the streets, pull trash out of, the drainage system, it actually will lower their future costs because you don't have to rely on, bringing in outside pumps to pump out your street. You have less costs in sort of the restoration efforts. So super low cost, high impact right there. There's other sort of community engagement things that can be done to kind of promote, sustainability. Going to your residents once a quarter and doing like, clothing drive. So getting them to kind of bring down supplies, toys, clothes that they don't use anymore. So you're kind of promoting that, and then the management team kind of just takes one load to like the Salvation Army or something like that. Again, low cost.
And you're taking something off their to-do list. So
Exactly right.
I
And they
really,
love
I
that.
really love these ideas, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
bringing to my HOA.
We'll do like battery recycling services as well. As we know, batteries need to be recycled a certain way. So we'll usually buy those containers. Residents will bring their old batteries down. So we kind of collect them on behalf of the whole building and recycle them properly. And then
What about paint and other toxic materials? You got paint, computers. Do you have any drives to kind of round that stuff up as well in some of your communities?
correct. In some of the more proactive communities and the ones that are really engaged in that sense, that will have like a battery recycling program or like an annual Christmas tree or holiday tree, disposal program. If we don't, say no, we always try to find solutions for yes. So even if it's one resident in the building that needs to, sort of recycle their old equipment, we do tend to find creative ways to re-recycle it, either donating it or recycling it properly. And then I think this list has been more or less kind of some very, low cost, high impact items. There's some much more significant projects that associations can undertake, which really don't cost much, depending on the model that they choose. Electric vehicle charging station installations. Nowadays, these, installation vendors will offer certain business models for the association where the association may not have to, commit to any sort of upfront costs. However, by charging a higher rate for the first X number of years, so the installation company can make its, money back, tends to work for all parties, right? So the HOA gets this great service, great amenity that they didn't have before. They can service residents, visitors, staff much better. And a lot of these things do add to the, resale value in the community as well. So I'll just give you a quick example. Personally, I don't have an electric vehicle. Will I ever get one? I don't know. But I'm definitely a proponent of it in the condo building that I live. And fortunately, I'm on the board as well, because I know it's a service and amenity that, will better serve the community as a whole. And it would lead to, higher value, resale value, in the future.
Well, before we step off the electric vehicle topic, by the way, I do own and enjoy an electric vehicle. It's very
Mm-hmm.
fast. I live in a single family home. I have my charger on my home, actually attached. I have a porte cochere and it's right there. It's extremely convenient. I will tell you that it's becoming a really hot topic with condos, particularly those that have enclosed parking structures, where they're
Mm-hmm.
very concerned. As you know, in Florida, we have a statute that says that the associations have to permit owners to install EV charging stations in their spaces. Now, what I'm encouraging some of my clients who have concerns about that is install a community station, like you just said, and install it in a location where you think it's going to be safer. Because we do have some issues and concerns with these EVs if they were to catch fire in an enclosed structure. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to have a local fire marshal on at some point talking about that very topic.
Sure. Yeah.
But look, it's here. And when you're talking about resale value, you're right, because there are more and more people who own these vehicles and they're looking to buy in communities where they can charge those vehicles. Doesn't make sense to have the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle and not to be able to charge it where you live. So it is going to be an ongoing issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're spot on. And again, what we're kind of seeing and hearing around the market is if people don't have an electric vehicle and if they don't anticipate it, they tend to still be for it for the reasons that you and I just mentioned.
So you were saying others. So let's talk about solar. Do you have we're only capturing the audio, but you're laughing and I'm kind of listen, what
Sure.
about solar? And by the way, I am having a solar guest on in the near future. So let's talk about the panels, whether it's in a individual homeowners association and as well as condos, vertical
Sure.
construction.
So I will definitely watch when your solar panelist is on. Um, right now we are seeing solar panels on a much smaller scale than potentially what, they have the opportunity to be. Obviously, administration, government agencies, can kind of dictate or kind of steer the whole future of renewable energies. And so as of right now, more on the single family home side, we do see a lot of solar panels taking place of like, diesel backup generators. So for example, power goes out after a storm, reduce the diesel by using solar. So that's happening right now. In some HOA communities, again, depending on the architectural modifications and controls, solar panels can be used on a single family home building. On the condo and high rise side, I do get asked this probably a couple times a year by either developers or board members. And, unfortunately, right now, at least on a grand scale, we have not seen that, really be implemented either because of construction costs or installation costs, or it's just not mainstream enough in these larger, building settings to really get the traction that I think, could ultimately come.
I think it might come. You've got these rooftops where you've got cell towers that are, they're leasing out space on the condo's roof for a cell tower. I could see installation of solar panels, maybe even just to power the
Hmm.
or as you said, as backup. But I think we're going to see more of it. I guess I'll ask my solar panel guest. But do you think that that's going to be on the horizon at some point?
I think so, and I hope so, and I hope it gets more to a, larger sort of rollout where it becomes a little bit more normal, and the whole renewable energy and reducing costs concept becomes, much more mainstream.
You mentioned the solar panels on a single family home in a homeowners association.
Mm.
We had panels on our house years ago for the pool. For us, it didn't work out, both aesthetically and functionally, it didn't work out. But are you aware? Do you have any communities where they have the whole Tesla roof? Have you seen this roof where it looks just like a metal roof, but the whole roof is a solar panel?
I have. I don't know if any of our communities have implemented that, but I definitely have seen it. And like I said, I hope that that becomes much more of the normal because it's very sustainable. It's very long-term cost conscious. Yeah, and it works.
Oh, it's a beautiful roof. It is a huge, the price is going to have to come down. I think when I was
Hmm.
looking, it's like 200,000 and up for
Hmm.
that roof. So I don't think it's going to be a choice for most people, but
Sure.
but again, that gets back to technology, right? So do you keep an eye on the technology and across the spectrum of these different, devices and equipment that can be used to create a greener community?
We do. And so, I mean, as a company, obviously the, management systems that we use to, maintain equipment, track equipment, keep record keeping, all of that, it's definitely in line or ahead of the market. Um, you know, my team and I, have the opportunity to work with developers, architects, designers of future projects where we tend to see, some of the new technology being implemented. Our department in developer services does take a very proactive approach in, reaching out to HVAC companies, designers, architects, building management system manufacturers, before the project even opens, just to learn about it. I mean, just on Monday of this week, I met a group who is sort of automating the whole, exterior window cleaning process by using, less equipment, less water, some robotic, machines to take the place of traditionally people with a lot of water and chemicals and supplies. So we're always trying to stay ahead of sort of what's happening in the market, and then we'll bring a lot of that information or even present these types of experts or vendors to our operations team, our regional team, our property managers who meet on a monthly basis. We'll do seminars with them as well. So any sort of information our department gathers for the future stuff, we definitely try to share it with the company as a whole, which then gets to our communities, and it brings another kind of level of added value to our clients.
I mean, it's great to get off on the right foot. So, meeting with the design team and the developer and kind of mapping out a sustainable community from inception,
Hmm.
that's best case scenario. And as you said, I'm sure a lot of those ideas can be transported to existing communities. It's just going to take more money because you're retrofitting on things.
Correct, correct. Depending on the equipment, depending on the solution, it could absolutely cost more money to retro. Or, the good thing is what I'm seeing with these sort of vendors who are innovating technology or systems that do lead to more sustainability, they do have the passion as well, and they have the drive consistently across the board. And so they are getting very creative and sort of thinking outside the box to put together, different models for prospective clients that would allow these clients to, um, purchase or move forward with their solution without, high upfront costs, whether that's loan, different assessment package, rebate program, putting together a amortization, depreciation, reserve schedule. I mean, these experts are thinking outside the box, and our company definitely thinks outside the box as well. And so that's leading to and will continue to lead to more communities sort of implementing this new technology that would traditionally be more expensive than they'd want to spend.
Well, the design trends have definitely changed over the years. So some of the older communities, there's a lot more concrete. And I remember when I had Jane Gilbert, Miami's chief heat officer, on the podcast, and she was talking about heat canyons where you've got so much concrete, you don't have a lot of plant material and trees that are offsetting it, creating shade. This becomes an issue also for communities that have a lot of employees working outdoors, whether it's pool people, beach attendants, their landscaping crew. Can you talk a little bit about using plant material and trees to kind of offset that, not only the rising temperatures, but also the AC costs?
Absolutely. So on the exteriors, there's always, our clients really look at, cost first. Sustainability maybe comes second. Not talking about all clients, but I think the general majority. So on the exteriors, when we inspect, analyze, or even set up a property, we're looking at all those things that you had just said. So everything from, different soils or mulch or rocks to use in the beds. Looking at the plants that are actually being considered. Are they plants that, consume more water than the average? Or are they a little bit more, dry, sun resistant type plants? So those come into the planning as well because you can then lower your, irrigation costs as well. Um, we do have, working areas where our employees or contractors obviously work outside. So getting creative by, planting more trees for shade or bringing in umbrellas or anything like that. We also do have, pool technology that, uses solar and sun to warm, heat, and power these pools like you were talking about as well. So there's a lot of, approaches that can be taken on the exterior. Then on the interior, like in the AC conditioned environments, we do take, very similar approach by, I mean, look, most of our properties are down in South Florida. And so, when we're putting our preventative maintenance program in place, the HVAC and mechanical systems, usually the second thing we look at right after life safety. And so we don't only just look at the equipment that's being used, but we look at the supplies that are going into the equipment, like what type of filters can be used to prolong the life, keep the temperatures cooler using less energy. We'll also look at, manufacturers' recommendations on frequency of clearing lines, drain lines, things like that. And there's an opportunity to, instead of doing once per year, maybe doing twice per year to achieve, the results that you were saying.
I was going
Um,
to say that maintenance plays a role too. So if you're if
Huge
you're
role.
keeping your equipment well maintained, I would assume it's functioning better, your costs are lower.
Correct. And it's not running as often as it may need to run if it weren't being maintained properly. We'll bring in, some of our cooling towers have a condensate tank where, all that water that already gets used, we sort of recycle it and we can reuse that water, in the cooling tower as well. So, reducing utility costs there. So the best thing to do, before a community even talks about upgrading is make sure you do your full due diligence on the equipment and systems that you already have in place, because chances are there's always going to be a better way to maintain that equipment that will lead to lower costs and more sustainable practices. So become an expert on your equipment first. Our engineers, our managers, I mean, we're very much dedicated to knowledge-based maintenance. And so apply that concept to your property before, you take any, drastic steps on retrofitting or upgrading.
So everything you've said so far makes total sense, and I imagine that a lot of boards, when they're hearing about this, whether they're coming from it from the perspective of I want to do the right thing for the environment, or they're coming from it from the perspective of, wow, this is really going to be cost effective and make everything run better in our community. They're on board. Let's talk about the resident buy-in.
Hmm.
Do you get it? Are the residents as excited about sustainability features?
They can be. So, depending on the market, depending on the demographic, there's definitely a good, group of folks who are passionate and gung ho and ready to go. Then there's a group that, a little bit more in the middle. They need to do their due diligence. They need to see the pros and cons of everything, right? And so, there's a number of sort of practices we implement and have implemented to kind of get folks more engaged. I think I say this a lot to my coworkers. One of our biggest responsibilities as property managers is to be educators, not only to our boards, but residents, staff, vendors. So educating them on, financials, maintenance services, et cetera. And so, it doesn't take anything but just a little effort, maybe forming a committee as well, which we do have green committees at some of our communities, but getting some folks involved who are ready to put a little bit more time and effort in, to kind of drive the message, drive the initiative, because they have full-time jobs, we have full-time jobs. So, the committee is a great approach, but being able to define what that committee's role is really important as well. We don't typically recommend, oh, just form a committee for the sake of it. Put charters together, provide very clear direction to this committee, because ultimately they're doing their due diligence on behalf of either the board of directors or manager, right? So it does need to be, collaborative. So you can have one committee member who really, looks at the current equipment, works with the chief engineer maintenance team, the record keeping to make sure that things are being done, to manufacturer's recommendation. You can have another committee member who kind of helps with RFP process if a certain project has been, established. So, being able to get a group of people together to align on a common goal is important.
Committees can be very helpful in building consensus. You're never
Hmm.
going to get everybody on board, but you know this means I have to tell you my committee joke, right?
Please do.
Do you know what a camel is?
Do I know what a camel is?
Yeah, do you know what a camel is?
It's a beautiful animal with
It's
humps.
a no, Nick, it's a horse by committee.
Okay. I have not heard that one, Donna.
You've never, you've never heard that joke. It's
No.
funny because one of our most downloaded episodes over 4 seasons on Take It to the Board was about committees with my partner, Ken Director. And I
Okay.
remember when I went to him and I said, I want to get you on the podcast. I said, I'm thinking about doing an episode on committees. He said, committees? That
Hmm.
sounds boring. Instead, it is, I think right now, it is our most downloaded episode because so
Wow.
many associations depend on committees. But to
Mhm.
your point, you do need to create the guardrails and a reasonable framework around what the committee's purpose is, what their scope of authority is, who's going to serve on it. There's a lot of infrastructure you need to build around that committee. Otherwise, you're right. They could be, or I'm right. They could be tasked with designing a horse and they come up with a camel.
We're both saying the same thing. But yes, yes, we agree on that case.
So we're talking about resident buy-in, and you're right,
Hmm.
committees can help, but I'm thinking I made a note when you were talking. Let's talk about, we talked about water pressure, I think. So I'm thinking about the impact of reduced shower pressure and toilet pressure. I'm sure
Hmm.
not everyone's going to be happy with that. And I'm also thinking, so I'm sitting in a high-rise office building, and we have these things on our lights where it automatically shuts off. So that's obviously a cost
Great.
savings technique. The lights are not staying on all the time. When we leave the office, it's going to shut off. When I enter the office, it's going to turn back on. Do you have that feature in any of your high rises?
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't even really talked about, lighting yet, but that's, going back to, I think, your first question of, what's phase one, phase two of upgrading or, implementing some of these practices. We always look at lighting, electrical system. We install sensors in a lot of different areas. Could be back of house areas, could be mail, could be mail room, could be storage rooms. Could be offices, stations. So sensors, dimmers. We do typically bring in newer light bulbs, LED, light bulbs to, prolong the life and use obviously much less electric than, fluorescent light bulbs. So that's a topic all on its own. But every community should do an assessment of their lighting areas to consider, newer bulbs, dimmers, and sensors.
Yeah, and listen, you're not going to make everybody happy. I'm sure there's somebody who goes into the mailroom and is unhappy that there's a half a second until that light turns on, but there's just as many other people who are happy that it's not burning all day long when nobody's in there.
Correct, correct. Because it's not just the electricity from the light, it warms the room. It's the electricity for the HVAC system as well. So there's a lot that's impacted by something so small as what you just said.
In your experience, Nick, do you see improved resident satisfaction and higher resale values in properties that have embraced green technologies?
So the general answer is yes, because green or sustainable technologies do typically lead to lower operating costs. And your resale value does tend to increase when you do have lower common costs, lower common operating costs. Additionally, if a building is for example, a LEED certified building, which has its own, requirements, um, the, developer or the seller of the unit can obviously, mention that, market it, sell it that way, which kind of puts it in its own, caliber as well. So short answer is yes.
You've mentioned lead twice. Why don't we go ahead and say what lead is?
I wish I were the expert in this. So where we tend to get involved in LEED certification is either a new development or an existing project that wants to become LEED certified, has the motive or reason to do it. And so, there's essentially, we've seen, a checklist of items that need to be implemented either in installation or construction or through operation in order to, maintain that, LEED certification. On the developer services side, we are working with some clients who have the goal of, becoming a LEED certified building. And it could be everything from the design of the building, the lighting that's used in the building, to as simple as, reporting utilities to, a local or governmental or specialized agency, which, that right there is very easy for us to do as well. And so I think we'll see, more LEED certified buildings in the residential setting, more in the future. And again, if these developers or these, communities get some sort of rebate or credit because of that, I think it's going to incentivize, more and more people to become that.
So I just looked it up, and
Mhm.
LEED, for our listeners, it's LEED. LEED certification is a globally recognized rating system by the U.S. Green Building Council for buildings and communities, demonstrating commitment to a comprehensive framework of sustainable building practices in design, construction, operation, and performance. So basically what Nick said in a more understandable format.
But in a much better way, is what you said.
What you said, absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you about marketing LEED certified and green buildings because
Mhm.
we've seen some buildings marketed as brand new buildings as non-smoking buildings. Other types of marketing in terms of what the building's restrictions are. In this case, are you seeing more buildings that are developers who are marketing their buildings as sustainable communities or HOAs as sustainable communities?
We are like in South Florida, we're definitely seeing an uptick in developers marketing their building as LEED certified. And we ask the questions, we push a little bit, we investigate, A, why are you doing that? B, what's the feedback from the prospects? And then C, what's the impact to the operation, to the budget that we'll ultimately be implementing? And they do say that there are a lot of prospective buyers out there who genuinely feel good buying into a building that they can say is a LEED certified building. They just feel like they're making an impact on the world, a more responsible impact. They're promoting that sort of design and build. So that's kind of one. Two, there are some folks who are very educated on, LEED certified initiatives and, get involved. They talk to their friends about it. Um, and so I think and I hope that we're going to see that more and more. We have over the last few years seen that become a little bit more normal than maybe we did, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
definitely
uplifting.
consumers out there that would gravitate
Hmm.
towards a green community. You mentioned, Nick, a few minutes ago about we were talking about plant material and landscaping. And if you remember years ago, more than a few years ago, the Florida legislature passed a law which said that a homeowners association could not prohibit xeriscaping, which is drought resistant landscaping. And the reason for that, they said that was good public policy in a state like Florida. So you
Hmm.
cannot, you cannot prevent somebody who wants to, in a homeowners association, install sometimes less than attractive plant material, but as long as
Sure.
it meets the xeriscaping guidelines. Florida has been moving towards stricter building codes and energy requirements. Do you think
Hmm.
boards are keeping up?
In mine and our experience, they are because of a few reasons. I mean, first of all, there's obviously, state requirements, but city and town requirements. Miami Beach is different than Miami, is different than West Palm, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're generally seeing is although there are these new initiatives that need to be implemented in these communities, I think on a much broader scale, like on the enforcement side, it's moving a little bit slower. It's moving at a pace where a board or a community can not just react quickly, but sort of plan for it. So I think as of right now, because they haven't been, I would say, so drastic of changes, that boards can and have been able to keep up with it up to this point.
I would agree, assuming that they have either professional management or an association attorney, because
Well, of
a
course.
lot of times, but I mean, it sounds self-serving, but the reality is we still have a large percentage of associations in Florida that have neither. They may go to an attorney occasionally if they have a collection matter, but they're not working with one on a regular basis, and they may be self-managed. So how do they learn about these changes to the law and the building codes? Unless I guess it could be that they're very proactive, but I think it makes it more challenging for them. Would you agree?
Extremely more challenging. And obviously not just saying that, on your behalf or our behalf. I mean, look, I work in the industry. I live in a small condominium building, that doesn't have, on-site staff, a lot of services. Could we be a self-managed community? Sure, absolutely. Do we want to be? Do I want to recommend it? Absolutely not. Because just like partnering with, legal counsel, partnering with a professional management company brings so much more value than just the day to day. But it's, being involved in, our company's involved in a, lobbyist group in the state, who really lobbies on behalf of community associations, right? So, me and some of my colleagues that, sit in on that, monthly sort of seminar, we can bring that, back to our communities. When these changes in laws, especially in our state, go into effect, we tend to know about it, much, much earlier than when they go into effect. So by partnering with professionals like us, it will then allow the community to not be so reactive, but take a very proactive and strategic approach to their future planning. I think our business development team has done a number of case studies on, self-managed communities that will ultimately hire, us. And the number one reason as to why they delayed it was cost. But our business development team has put case studies together that show that the long-term costs are actually greater if you're self-managed because you don't get all that extra added value. you can't be proactive. You're much more reactive, which tends to lead to higher operating costs.
Well, you don't have the lead time. So we even saw
Exactly.
that with the milestone inspections and the structural integrity reserve studies, that kind of the stragglers, they did not have the same choice in terms of the professionals they were going to hire. They didn't
Mhm.
have the same choice then with regard to the contractors who were going to do any necessary repair work. So the lead time is significant. I do think, Nick, that sometimes our public policy makers just assume that all these volunteer boards are being guided by the proper professionals
Good
without
point.
realizing that for a lot of them, they're not. They're just not. And they are behind the eight ball. So it's a really good point. I do have to ask you before you leave, you said you serve on your board.
Mhm.
By the way, I served on my HOA board for 2 years, and it was a
Mhm.
lot given what I do for a living. Are you
Sure.
currently on your condo board?
I am. I've been on it for the last 2 years. Once my community found out what I do for a living, they basically said, you don't have a choice. You have to do it. So I said I would, of course, I mean, look, I would, of course, do it. I am the officer and treasurer. So I handle a lot of the financial items with our management team. There's 5 board members, so I'm one of 5. We also have 2 in-house ambassadors, so they're kind of engaged with the community. They're part of the social committee. We actually have a green committee as well, because our condo building has a out back. We have probably a quarter of an acre of land where we have grown a community garden. And
That
so
is
in that
so
community,
cool.
and so in that community garden, it's herbs, it's vegetables, it's flowers, and we have a couple of, retired folks who go down to the garden basically every single day, kind of maintain it. But it's one of those really cool, neat sort of, green initiatives. So it saves me from, driving down the street to pick up herbs when I need. The tomatoes are really great in the summertime. So, and it brings the community together. So, like every other, 3 months or so, we'll have like a social event down there, do like a garden party or something like that. So you
Nick,
just have,
that is, but that's amazing. First of all, you're
yeah.
talking to somebody who is an avid gardener. I even go beyond. I have a compost pile. So,
We have a community compost as well.
oh, you're speaking my love language. So
Hmm.
that's the point. I always thought, well, I can't go to a condo because what am I
Hmm.
doing with my garden? This is a really unique concept. I wonder how many other, condos out there have community gardens because you're right. You're making dinner and you want to go get an herb and you can just run down and grab it out of the garden.
And everybody in the building, I would say most people in the building, throughout the week or every couple of days, they'll collect their scraps, their eggshells, their coffee grounds, and maybe a couple times a week they'll come down and just drop it right in the compost pile. And like I said, we have a couple of full-time resident volunteers that will go down and mix the compost, every few days or so, and then they use it right there in the garden. So it's
Man, that's fantastic.
and yeah, and structurally, I wish, our condos were designed to be able to kind of support, operations like that. Obviously, in a downtown city, it's tough to accomplish that. But yeah, you just find the right community with the right people that kind of have the same sort of values as you do, and great things happen.
I've been reading that in a lot of different cities, in condo buildings, multifamily buildings, they have beehives
Mm.
on their roofs. I don't, that may be something for you to check into.
Very cool. Very, very, very cool. I'm gonna have to see if we have any communities doing that right now.
The bees.
The beat.
If you had a magic wand, what
Hmm.
green feature would you want to see every condo or HOA adopt tomorrow?
Sure. So great question. I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would, want everybody to kind of get engaged and involved in this. But if you're asking, what sort of feature to adapt, I think, our company is primarily in the state of Florida. And a good piece of our business is in South Florida. And everybody can attest that traffic isn't great, street infrastructure, all that stuff, may not be keeping up with the growing demand of housing down here. And so when you think of a sort of necessary, operating expense in any community, it's trash and recycling. And so right now, you know, in the high-rise setting, it's a lot of, trash chutes with compactor. There is technology and systems out there that are operating abroad. They're even operating like in New York City right now, that instead of, a traditional sort of trash chute, it's that same concept, but they use almost like vacuum technology to move the trash, down more efficiently. And then when it gets to its sort of home base, it compacts, much greater than the traditional sort of compact system. And the whole idea and concept there is to reduce the number of trips that a trash truck would need to come to your property, so less gas, less traffic, less wear and tear on public services. But also, what they're picking up is much more compact versus, the traditional route. It's dirtier, traditionally than what it could be. So I think if, for this sort of South Florida market could really look at that kind of holistically, I think it could, I think it could be a huge game changer, not just in lowering costs, for communities, but also lowering costs for public services and just making the day-to-day experience of a resident or somebody, traveling around the city, much more appealing.
It's a really good recommendation. So folks, start looking at your trash
Yeah.
first. But you know what? Also in the multifamily buildings, I think you need to have comprehensive policies in place regarding owners who are renovating their units in their homes and how they deal with their trash.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times their contractors, the way they're disposing of trash is impacting the community overall. So I guess
Correct.
last question is where can people find you, Nick? And, if you can point them to some KW resources on sustainability, that would be great.
Sure. So, although we're a large, management company, we have 300 properties across the state. I would say, are definitely much more flexible when compared to more, traditional management companies. What I mean by that is we've always taken a very boutique approach with our clients. So we're not just like a cut paste type company. We really, really want to learn about you, want to see what you're all about, and want to, bring in our wealth of knowledge, resource systems, to your property and really customize it so it's a really a match made in heaven. When the company started 20 plus years ago, that was our founders, motto, was taking that very boutique approach and, growing, 300 plus communities across the state. We still take that approach. So, whether you just want to talk or whether you want to learn more about our services or, you want to consider engaging us, just go to, kwpmc.com. We have a great website where we list a lot of services from developer services to food and beverage services, hospitality. We'll manage, high-rise condos, low-rise condos, HOAs, even, motorhomes are really becoming, much more, popular in different parts of the state. So reach out to us and we'll make it work. And if not, we have, sister companies that we can definitely recommend that may be a better fit for your community's model.
Nick, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a great
Absolutely.
topic. I learned a lot.
Anytime. This is super fascinating. Again, something that I'm passionate about, and hopefully, folks will see that, it doesn't take time, effort, little steps, go a long way. But thank you so much for having me, Donna. You and your company are great with not just our clients, but just the industry and the market in general. So thank you for continuing to guide our residents, homeowners board the right way.
It's our pleasure. Thanks, Nick. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to follow and rate us on your favorite podcast platform or visit takeittotheboard.com for more ways to connect.